You're watching the Everything Network. Sylvester Zottola's murder looked at first like an old New York Mafia execution. A 71-year-old Bronx businessman, long reported as a Bonanno-connected figure, was shot dead in a McDonald's drive-thru on Webster Avenue on October 4, 2018. He had survived threats, a home invasion, a knife attack, and months of stalking. His son Salvatore had also been shot and nearly killed. The violence had the shape of an underworld message, but the truth that came forward in federal court was more personal, more bitter, and more modern. The murder was not ordered by a rival family. Prosecutors proved it was ordered by Sylvester's own son, Anthony Zottola. The case sits at the crossing point of three worlds: old Mafia money, Bronx real estate, and hired street violence. Sylvester Zottola, known as Sally Daz, had been reported for years as an associate of the Bonanno crime family, with ties to Vincent Vinny Gorgeous Basciano. His older reputation came from the gambling machine world, especially joker poker machines placed in restaurants and social clubs. But by the time of his death, the clearest money target was his real estate empire. Federal prosecutors said Sylvester controlled a residential portfolio of multifamily rental properties worth tens of millions of dollars. That portfolio made the murder more than a family dispute. It was a succession war inside a private fortune. Anthony Zottola helped manage the properties, collected rent, maintained buildings, and helped run A&S Maintenance, a company he jointly owned with his brother Salvatore. He was already inside the family business. He knew the properties. He knew the cash flow. He knew the people around his father. The government's case showed a son who did not want to inherit slowly. He wanted control, and he turned that desire into a murder-for-hire conspiracy. The old Mafia shadow gave investigators an early theory. Sylvester's history made it reasonable to ask whether an organized crime figure wanted him dead. He had lived near the Bonanno world. He had operated gambling machines. His past included contact with powerful names. In New York, those facts carry weight. When a man with that background is hunted across months and finally executed in public, the first question naturally points toward the five families. But the federal record moved in a different direction. The violence did not come from a Bonanno order. It came from within the Zottola family itself, pushed outward through a hired chain. Anthony Zottola hired Bushorn Shelton, a leader tied to the Bloods, to arrange the killings of Sylvester and Salvatore. Shelton then recruited others. The work was outsourced through a crew of hitmen, drivers, trackers, and shooters. The old Mafia world was in the background. The killing machine was a modern murder-for-hire network. The attacks began before the public killing. On November 26, 2017, Sylvester was menaced at gunpoint by a masked individual. That was an early warning, though he did not yet know who stood behind it. A month later, on December 27th, 3 men invaded his home. They struck him in the head with a gun, stabbed him repeatedly, and slashed his throat. He survived. At his age, surviving that kind of attack was almost impossible to process as random violence. Someone wanted him dead, and the attempts were not stopping. The home attack revealed the cruelty of the conspiracy. Sylvester was not a young target in a street dispute. He was an elderly man attacked inside his own residence. The attackers did not merely threaten him. They beat him, stabbed him, cut his throat, and left him alive by chance. After that, he had to keep living with the knowledge that someone had entered his house and tried to end him. What he did not know was that the person behind the attacks shared his own blood. The next major strike came against Salvatore Zottola. On July 11, 2018, a gunman shot Salvatore in the head, chest, and hand outside his residence. He survived, badly wounded. Salvatore's survival kept the full family business target visible. This was not only about removing Sylvester. Anthony also wanted his brother gone. In the government's account, the murder plan aimed at both the father and the brother, clearing the path toward control of the business. The attacks kept failing, but the conspiracy did not stop. Each survival gave Anthony another chance to abandon the plan. He did not. The pressure continued, and the plot became more organized. The conspirators placed a tracking device on Sylvester's car. That device changed the final attack from stalking by chance into targeted surveillance. It allowed the shooter to find Sylvester at a precise moment, away from home, moving through an ordinary part of his day. On October 4th, 2018, Sylvester Zottola drove to a McDonald's on Webster Avenue in the Bronx. He waited in the drive-thru to pick up coffee. It was a small routine, the kind of moment that should have meant nothing beyond an elderly man moving through his morning. Heman Ross tracked him there. Ross approached and fired multiple shots, killing Sylvester in his vehicle. The public location made the killing feel even colder. The plot had followed him into one of the most ordinary spaces in the city and ended his life there. The drive-thru murder became one of the most memorable New York underworld killings of the modern period. Not due to a boss title, not due to a family war. It stood out through contrast. A man linked in public memory to the banana world was not killed in a classic Mafia dispute. He was killed through a contract arranged by his son, using a street gang-linked crew, over control of real estate and money. The old underworld supplied the image. The evidence supplied the betrayal. The text messages after the killing became central to the case. Ross and Shelton exchanged messages after the hit. Shelton then contacted Anthony Zottola and informed him that his father had been murdered. Shelton asked, "Can we party today or tomorrow?" Anthony answered with coded payment language, saying he would have the cases of water ready soon. Investigators later recovered a photograph from one of Shelton's phones showing bottled water and more than $200,000 in banded cash. That coded phrase became one of the case's defining details. It reduced a father's murder to payment logistics. It showed the business-like tone of the conspiracy after the killing was complete. Sylvester was dead. Salvatore had survived a shooting. Anthony's response was not shock, grief, or horror. In the government's proof, it was payment language. The son who appeared as a family member in public was moving money behind the murder. The investigation pulled the conspiracy apart through modern evidence: text messages, cell phones, tracking device data, surveillance, cooperating witnesses, financial records, and forensic work all helped reveal the chain. The device on Sylvester's car showed coordination. The communications showed planning and aftermath. The payment evidence showed motive and completion. The case did not rely only on underworld rumor. It was built through digital trails and courtroom proof. Anthony Zottola's defense tried to point toward old Mafia explanations and third-party blame. That made sense as a trial strategy. Sylvester's background gave room for suspicion. A man with reported banana ties, gambling machine history, and possible protection payment issues could have enemies. But prosecutors persuaded the jury that the true conspiracy came from Anthony, Shelton, Ross, and the recruited crew. The Mafia shadow was real enough to confuse the first view of the killing, but it did not save Anthony in court. The trial lasted 6 weeks. In October of 2022, a federal jury in Brooklyn convicted Anthony Zottola Sr. and Heman Ross of murder-for-hire conspiracy, murder-for-hire, firearms offenses, and causing Sylvester Zottola's death through the use of a firearm. A third defendant, Alfred Lopez, was acquitted. The verdict drew a clear legal line. Anthony was not merely accused of being near the family business or connected to suspicious people. He was found guilty of hiring men to kill his father and brother. In April of 2023, Anthony Zottola and Heman Ross were sentenced to mandatory life imprisonment, plus 112 years. The extra years carried symbolic force: 41 years for Salvatore's age when he was shot, and 71 years for Sylvester's age when he was killed. The sentence reflected both victims. One survived the assassination attempt, one did not. The court punished the murder and the attempted destruction of the brother. Bushorn Shelton, the man who organized the hired violence after Anthony brought him into the plot, received 37 years in prison in June of 2023. Shelton had pleaded guilty to murder for hire and murder for hire conspiracy. Other co-defendants had already pleaded guilty and received long prison terms ranging from 16 to 22 years. The conspiracy did not end with one shooter. It required recruitment, surveillance, attempted attacks, payment movement, and repeated efforts to finish the job after earlier failures. Hyman Ross carried the trigger role in the final murder and the attack on Salvatore. Prosecutors said Ross shot both victims, Salvatore in July and Sylvester in October. His position in the case shows how murder for hire can separate motive from action. Anthony supplied the motive, Shelton supplied the organizing layer, Ross supplied the final violence. Each man occupied a different part of the chain. Together, they turned inheritance greed into a year-long campaign of murder attempts. Salvatore's survival is one of the most important human parts of the story. He was not only a witness to his father's death, he was also a target. He had been shot in front of his home and lived through wounds to his head, chest, and hand. He then had to face the truth that his own brother had plotted against him and their father. The case was not only patricide, it was a family purge aimed at business control. The real estate empire gives this case its modern economic shape. Many mafia-linked stories revolve around gambling, unions, narcotics, loans, and construction. The Zottola case revolved around property. Multi-family rental buildings created long-term cash flow, inheritance value, leverage, and control. Real estate can be less visible than street rackets and more durable than fast, illegal money. Whoever controlled the portfolio controlled a fortune. Prosecutors said Anthony wanted that control badly enough to eliminate the people ahead of him. Sylvester's older gambling machine world also adds depth. Joker poker machines were part of a Bronx underworld economy where restaurants, social clubs, and cash businesses could carry illegal gambling streams. Reported ties to the Bonanno family placed Sylvester in an older world of machine routes, protection, and neighborhood influence. By the late 2010s, that world had changed. Old bosses were dead or imprisoned. Crews had shifted. Street gangs, Russian-speaking networks, Albanian groups, and other criminal actors had entered spaces once dominated by Italian organized crime. The Zottola case shows that transition in brutal form. The murder was not a clean mafia succession. It was not a sanctioned family hit. It was a private family betrayal using available street violence. That distinction is central to the modern meaning of the case. Organized crime in New York had become more fragmented, more hybrid, and less dependent on one formal hierarchy. A man with an old Bonanno-linked background could be targeted through a Bloods-connected murder crew hired by his own son. That would have seemed almost unthinkable in an earlier era when formal mafia protection carried stronger force. The case also shows how the mafia myth collapses under family greed. The language of honor, loyalty, and blood has always been part of the public image surrounding organized crime. The Zottola case cut through it. Anthony did not protect his father. He paid men to hunt him. He did not protect his brother. He tried to have him killed. The family business was not a bond. It became the prize. The repeated failed attempts make the story even darker. Anthony had time. After the gunpoint threat, he had time. After the home invasion and throat slashing, he had time. After Salvatore was shot and survived, he had time. Each stage created another opportunity to stop. The conspiracy continued until Sylvester was dead. That slow persistence gave prosecutors one of their strongest moral arguments at sentencing. This was not one sudden violent act. It was a campaign. The final murder also changed how investigators understood the earlier attacks. What could first appear as disconnected violence became a pattern. Menace, home invasion, stabbing, attempted shooting, attack on Salvatore, tracking device, drive-through execution. Once Anthony's role became clear, the whole year came into focus. The violence was not random escalation. It was repeated failure followed by adjustment. The courtroom record also carried a later appellate chapter. In November of 2025, the United States Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit affirmed the convictions and life sentences of Anthony Zottola and Hyman Ross. Anthony then pursued Supreme Court review, challenging issues including evidentiary rulings and the anonymous jury. Those later filings kept the case alive legally, but the central verdict remained in place. The federal system had already answered the main question. Anthony Zottola hired men to kill his father and brother to take control of the family business. The Bronx setting gives the case its local force. This was not a distant criminal operation hidden from everyday life. The attacks moved through residences, streets, a family compound, vehicles, and a fast food drive-through. The places were ordinary. The violence was not. That contrast is one reason the case stayed in public memory. A murder-for-hire plot built around real estate and family betrayal ended in a place where any New Yorker might stop for coffee. The Bonanno connection should be handled with precision. Sylvester was widely reported as a Bonanno associate and as someone close to Basciano's circle, but the murder itself was not proved as a Bonanno-ordered killing. That is what makes the case stronger, not weaker. It begins with the look of a Mafia assassination and ends with the revelation that the threat came from inside the victim's own family. The old Mafia angle is the doorway. The son's betrayal is the room. The Zottola case belongs in the modern Mafia series, even though the final conspiracy was not a traditional family war. It reveals what remained around the edges of the older underworld. Gambling machine history, Bonanno-linked reputation, real estate wealth, private security fears, street gang violence, and federal organized crime prosecutors handling the case. It shows the old world bleeding into the new one. The names and neighborhoods came from one era. The phones, trackers, outsourced shooters, and digital evidence came from another. The full meaning is harsh. Sylvester Zottola survived old criminal circles, aging underworld ties, and years of dangerous associations, only to be destroyed by his own son's greed. The fortune he built became the motive. The family business became the target. The brother became an obstacle. The father became a contract. In the end, the most dangerous person near Sylvester was not a rival boss, not a forgotten enemy, and not a stranger from the old Bonanno world. It was the son already standing close enough to know exactly what killing him could unlock. The final picture is the Bronx in a modern underworld transition. An elderly man with an old Mafia-linked past, a valuable real estate portfolio, a son inside the business, a brother nearly killed, a hired Bloods-connected crew, a tracking device hidden on a car, a public murder in a drive-through. Then the courtroom. Life sentences, guilty pleas, digital proof, and the old theory of a Mafia hit replaced by something colder. The Zottola murder-for-hire case is not only a crime story. It is a study of inheritance, weakened protection, family betrayal, and the way modern New York violence can pass through old Mafia shadows without being controlled by them.